Good morning. I just have a final few words about grants that I want to leave with you, and then I think our time together is pretty much going to be over. So I just want to talk generally about the grant writing, writing proposals that win book, and sort of wrap that up. The hardest thing that I found about writing grants or teaching people how to write grants or helping people as they write their grant is actually getting people to read and stick to the guidelines. So, whatever you do, first you select a grantor that wants to fund what you want to do. You follow their guidelines meticulously, and that means if they have a heading that says introduction, then you have a heading in your proposal that says introduction. If they have a heading that says significance of the problem, then you have a heading called significance of the problem. That way they never have to guess at whether or not you're meeting their criteria. Most grant proposals, now foundations are somewhat different, but most grantors will actually give you very specific guidelines. Federal grants are great at giving you very specific guidelines. So if you read and write to their guidelines, you'll be in good shape. Um, the main thing that grantors are looking for are people who understand and are sympathetic to their mission and goal. They want to give away their money. They actually are mandated by the federal government to give away a percentage of their money. But they want to give it to people that they believe are going to do with it the things that they want done. So be sure you research that foundation or that federal agency and really understand what their mission is, what their priorities are. Sometimes grants will, request for proposals, RFPs, will say that, but more often that's just stuff you have to ferret out about the agency or the foundation for yourself. It's not hard. Most of them have it on their website. So it just, again, takes a little bit of reading, a little bit of digging, but it's all there. And in your proposal, you have to reiterate to them that you understand what their mission and what their preferences and priorities are, and how your program or your agency that you're writing for meets those things. I want to talk just a second about budgets. Budgets are hard, and it's always hard to know how much do I ask for. Most grantors will say we give a maximum of this much. That doesn't mean you have to ask for the maximum. It does mean that usually if they say this is our maximum, you can drop that down by 10% or so and expect that that's the real maximum. If it's a project, if you're, for instance, if you're invited by an agency or a foundation to apply to them, they may give you, because of their interest in your particular project, they may give you an unlimited budget, or they may say, don't worry about cost, just send it to us and we'll negotiate from there. That's great, but that's rare. So pay attention to the budget numbers. A couple of things I want to point out are things like what some, for instance, federal grants actually give you something called indirect costs. Indirect costs are the costs that don't have anything to do with the grant per se, but have to do with actually running the organization. And the percentage of indirect costs that an institution charges or that a grantor allows can vary. USM can charge indirect rates from 9% all the way up to 51%. So if you write a grant for $300,000 and it's at a 50% F&A rate, you only get $150,000 because USM gets the rest, right? So it's always a negotiation. So if you're a small nonprofit, you're likely not to charge or have any kind of negotiated indirect cost rate. That doesn't mean you couldn't have one if you wanted. You would just need to negotiate that with the agency. And you would probably want to keep it very low, like maybe 3% or something like that. Because remember, whatever you get in indirect just goes back into your general fund. It doesn't go to fund the project that you're trying to work on. And because small nonprofits are focused on a project-based mission for the most part, you want all that money to go into your project. So I would not worry about indirect costs, but I do want you to understand what they are. It's keeping the lights on. It's providing telephones on your desk. It's keeping the streets on the campus paved and in working order. It's water in the bathrooms. It's that kind of infrastructure stuff. So that's what facilities and administration, F&A, or sometimes called indirect. All right. So there's the in-kind cost, or there's indirect is one kind of in-kind, and another. I mean, sometimes grants will say we want you to match us or provide in-kind costs of up to 50% of the project cost. So that means in-kind cost means costs are money, time, and effort, supplies, other kinds of things that the agency would contribute to the project. So, for example, you might say, because we've never done grants before, and as a result of that, our director is going to contribute 25% of her time to oversee the project, including the fiscal responsibility, the paperwork, the reporting, those kinds of things. So 25% of your director's time and effort, the cost of that would be counted as match or in-kind support for the project. And that's not an unreasonable amount either. For very small agencies, often you are hiring people to do the project. So the grantor would pay for the personnel to do the project. People already on staff would contribute a portion of their time and effort as in-kind cost to match the grant. Matching can get tricky, but you just have to be realistic about it. You can't, for example, you can't say that the director of a nonprofit who already has a full-time job is going to give up 100% of his or her time to run the grant project, because then who runs the nonprofit, right? So you can't match the directors. You can't use 100% of that person's salary toward match. It doesn't make sense. The agency still has to run whether the grant is there or not. So you just have to be careful with it. It can be a little tricky the first time or two that you do it, but it's not hard. You just have to be careful, cautious, and very diligent. In terms of budget, again, going back to budget, someone says, okay, you can write a grant up to $1 million. Well, you may not have the infrastructure to support $1 million project, but you could do a project for $50,000 for 1 year, right? So you can write for $50,000. Writing as a small nonprofit, writing a huge grant where you don't have the personnel, you don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the office support or whatever, it's not going to make sense to the grantor, and they're not going to fund you. So you have to be reasonable and realistic about what you and your agency can actually accomplish. So don't ask for too much money. Certainly don't pad your budget. A grant is for a specific activity or set of activities. It's not to supplement your whole organization. That's a common misconception. Unless a grantor says we provide operating funds and you can write in 25% overhead to support general operations. They rarely do that, almost non-existent. And as a result, a lot of people will say, oh, well, we need $600 a month in office supplies, when that's completely unsupported in your program activities. So that's not gonna get funded. So you have to be reasonable, and you have to be judicious in how you ask for money and what you ask for money to do. So ask for enough money in your budget to do your project. If the grantor believes, if you say we're going to reach out and touch 100,000 people and we're going to do that for $10,000. Well, depending on how you're touching them, that may not be nearly enough money. So you got to think about what is reasonable for this project. What's it truly going to cost us if we do it right and know we do it? And then you simply write a budget justification to go along with your numbers so that they can see how you came up with those figures. And almost all grantors will ask for a budget justification. So that's, we're hiring this person at this salary, this person has to have a master's degree, and blah, 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 what the qualifications and responsibilities for the job are. And remember that, our cost of living in the South is lower and our salary structure is lower. So if you're writing a grant and hiring a director of a project in Mississippi, the salary is necessarily going to be lower than it would be if that person were in New York City doing the exact same project. So you can't pad your budget there either. Okay. All right. What else? I just think that budgeting, there's nothing hard about budgeting unless you've never done it before. So if you are new to the idea of how much do things cost and how would I find these things out? I mean, I always go to Travelocity and price different. If I'm saying travel to this place and blah, 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 then I just take a snapshot, a 30-day snapshot of travel from wherever I want one person to go to the other place, and just say airfare is going to be approximately this amount. And agencies understand that what you plan for today, the price of it may be different next week. So there's some ability to fluctuate between budget lines. So maybe your commodities are more than you actually did need. I mean, not outrageous, but still more than you actually spent. So you can move some of that money to your travel budget because flights went up, because gas prices went up. So agencies understand that and have some leeway in there as long as you don't overspend the bottom line. So anyway, I guess that's about it on budgets. I mean, the main thing is make sure you have enough. Don't ask for more than you can actually handle and do. Be reasonable about the costs of what you're asking for. Do a justification to make sure that they understand where you got the numbers. In some budgets, I'll even attach screenshots to indicate where I got my information from about flights or travel or hotels, just so that they understand that what I'm doing is reasonable today. It may not be reasonable in a year, right? Or I could find a different flight that costs $300 less, and I might do that if we're actually on the ground with the grant. But for today, here's what a flight would cost. Here's what travel is. Here's what hotel is, whatever. And especially it gets tricky if you're projecting out a 2 or 3 or 5 year grant. I was in Washington the first year of a 5-year project that I wrote and got funded. And they said, well, what do you think the problems are with the process of writing and putting this grant together? And I said, well, honestly, after year 2, we're just daydreaming. It's a dream. It's not real planning. It's not real, because we don't know what's going to happen after 2 years. I mean, I can pretty much guess what's going to happen the first year, and I have an idea the second year. But after that, the truth is, it's anybody's guess what could happen, because you really can't predict what costs are going to do across the board in that kind of way. Or I can't. I'm not an economist, so I don't know. And they were like, yeah, well, we know, and that's why we do budget revisions, and that's why we give you some flexibility to move money and stuff like that. But still, you know, this was a $2 million grant over 5 years, and it was just every year I submitted a new budget, and I never overspent the amount they gave me, but I reorganized the money in pretty significant ways just because things changed. Right now, the mission of the project, the goal of the project didn't change, but how we were doing things, and because it was a technology grant, the technology had changed. The technology actually had changed vastly by year 2 of the project, and so I rewrote that grant to incorporate the new technology and what we were going to do with new technology. So anyway, just be aware that you can plan as much as you want to, but once you really get on the ground with things, it is anybody's guess kind of what's going to happen, what kind of barriers are going to come up or whatever. So that brings me to probably my last point, which perhaps was also, I hope, one of my first points, and that's about communication. The most important thing, if you have a grant with an agency or a foundation, is to keep the lines of communication open and make sure that they understand what you're doing. If you're they're there to help you. They're there to help you spend the money appropriately, to make good decisions, to help you find ways around problems if you encounter problems, to coach you in whatever you need coaching in. They're all about you being successful because they made a commitment to you and your project through this grant. So don't ever forget to call on those people and let them do their jobs. Let them help you. I made monthly telephone calls to my program officer on this 5-year grant. I sent monthly updates on what was happening. Anytime we had a press release or an article in the local newspapers or whatever, I clipped that and sent that to them. And as a result, I had a very strong relationship with my program officer. And this was actually, we were in year 4, I guess, the year Katrina hit. And as soon as my program officer could get through to me on the telephones, she said, we've been working up here to try to figure out what we can do to help y'all, and I've pulled together some extra money, and because you're already one of our grantors, if you can use an extra $300,000, I can send you that right away. And they did that because I was keeping my agreements with them and keeping lines of communication open, right? I went to visit my program officer twice in D.C. during that 5 years. She was planning to come down here the fall before Katrina hit, and she canceled her plans, thank goodness. But it was a good relationship, and so keeping your program contacts and your program officers happy is very important. And that's true whether it's a big grant like I had with the Department of Ed, or whether it's a very small project that you might have with the Mississippi Humanities Council for $1,500. It's still important to keep them engaged and knowing that you're doing what they want you to do with the funds. Okay? All right, so good budgeting, good communication, write to the request for proposals or the guidelines. Make sure you write to those. And you don't need to be overly flowery with your language. This is technical writing, not creative writing, and not scholarly writing. Another problem I have on the university campus is that our faculty write as if they're publishing in a journal rather than to just folks. And most of your program people are just folks, and they just want to know that you know what you're doing, that you've looked at what's going on in the world of this kind of project, and that you see what others have done and are doing, and that what you're going to do is going to make a real contribution. Okay, that's it. It's simple. So nothing hard about grant writing. It's just, if anything, it's tedious and time-consuming, but can be incredibly rewarding in terms of letting you do the stuff that you're passionate about. So that's it. So, folks, it's been a great joy to me to have you in the class. I am going to post a few PDFs up in the class of tips and tricks and things like that. We didn't get to actually writing the big project that I had planned for you. I just ran out of time this summer, and I apologize for that. My husband was actually had surgery a week ago and is going to have some more surgery Monday. So I just got sidetracked and didn't get your assignment posted in time for you to have adequate time to finish it. So what I'm going to do is just post these tips and tricks handouts. Know that I'm here. Keep my contact information. If there's a way I can help you in the future, just give me an email and let me know. I'll be happy to do that. I wish you all the best of luck, and keep Southern Miss in mind. All right? Thanks, guys. Bye.